Officers and CEOs and presidents of unions and so forth. And then there are men and women in this room who do the work every day in schools and classrooms. And so both vertically and horizontally, that's unexpressed but ought to be expressed. The last piece is just the cognitive piece of turn, and then we will turn to our visitors and our leaders for the day and a half. Turn is always about, has always been about, not simply an attempt to change the culture in which we do constant work and improvement of teaching and learning, but to do so with a tough personal eye. And that is to say that we understand that the work always has to get better. But the thing that ought to be different in this room is that the union, the organized labor group, are the ones who said we ought to basically sponsor venues as well, in which we come together as collaborative teams to do this work. And the third piece is that we always ought to be looking for, and this piece we're working on today is the classic kind of national, state, and local example of that. We ought to be looking for the voice of the professional, and the voice of the professional growing more and more powerful every day. And that means a journey. And it means a journey for almost everybody, and it means a journey for the organized labor groups as well. Because we were organized about 40 or 50 years ago with a more industrial model. And an industrial model worked for us in many ways in certain areas. And this is our moment, Dean's absolutely right, to kind of claim the third prong, which is to say, as we organized for 30 or 40 years around the industrial model, there are all sorts of pieces that come with that, we've been very successful. Where we need our voice now is deeply in the redesign, the implementation of ongoing improvements in teaching and learning. That is our work. And anything that kind of prevents us, even our own organization, from going more deeply into that, is also the agenda internal. So it is about the improvement of the work. It's the improvement of the people, the men and women who do that work, and therefore improvement for children. And it has always been a place where we dedicated ourselves to say we will also look at our own organization. And if the union has to move and change and reform itself, this thing is called the Teacher Union Reform Act. And early on, of those 15 years, Tom can speak to it more powerfully than I in many ways, these rooms were not viewed in a terribly friendly fashion by his organization and the one that I'm very close to, the NEA, and nor the AFT. This was seen as possible breakaway. This was seen as insurrection. This was seen as something tricky. In the last 5 years or so, I think this is seen as a wonderful place by both national unions for the improvement and the drive around reform and teaching and learning. So the thing has come round and round. So why would we go to Marlborough, New York, and ask them to come and kind of lead us in a kind of a reflection of what this work means? And so that has to be a natural question. And I'm going to let you, in some senses, make those decisions over the next day and a half. Well, I'll tell you why Mary and I, they have been with us now for 3 or 4 sessions. And this is a small, very small district, all right, up the Hudson River from New York City. But something has happened there in terms of the culture and the leadership. So all I will say to you is clearly the collaborative piece will come. We will look at all of their work, including breakouts in technology and what the CCSS means for technology, math, ELA, social science, and all of the kind of classroom pieces of that, at least what they've learned in the first 2 or 3 years out. But the piece I really want to challenge you is to listen for what it is and what effect they've had regionally in their area of New York, number one. And number two, ask yourself whether you can, after an hour, figure out what their roles are. Robin being probably, in my judgment, the trickiest. All right? But they're all very tricky. Ask her if she's a manager or a teacher leader. And ask her about her titles there. Ask them whether they stay within the boundaries of Marlborough or whether the professional development and all of their work here actually stops there or infiltrates all of the districts that they touch. Ask them where they are any given week using their learning across the East Coast around what it is they've learned. This is a wonderful example of the profession not only kind of taking this thing, but then sharing it in every possible venue. My best story of today is they get stuck in Newark yesterday for 5 or 6 hours.